Good morning.
Hello.
All right, so we're changing it up today. We were going to be talking about some other aspect of the ego, and I didn't even know what that was because Mandy was going to announce what that was. But overnight, I've been thinking about a message that Mandy sent me on Facebook, and she's going to talk more about that, about a horoscope reading that she's had for this coming month. And it was about to do with time, and it was sort of like, time's actually really interesting, and I just felt to talk about it. So we're putting aside what we were going to be talking about today, and we're going to talk about time because we're in the infinite flow, and that's what came up.
Yeah.
So time's really quite an interesting thing, and I've thought a lot about it over the years, and I do recall having a conversation at one stage many years ago about time itself and the fact that you actually never see time itself. It's actually impossible to actually observe.
Yeah.
So you can see the results of time. So you might cut an apple now and you leave it on the bench, and then in an hour's time, it's gone brown. So, you'll look at your watch now, and in 4 hours' time, the hand has moved, and you go, okay, time has passed. And it's like, but where was the time? Like, you never actually had time itself. You never observed time, you observed the results of time. So an apple going bad, a watch hand moving, the sun moving. But what is time? So is time actually, does it even exist? And is it just a human concept? So, and the reason I guess I wanted to talk about it was because I feel like over the years it's really impacted my thought processes around manifestation and my belief about being able to manifest things. So if somebody told me right now I have to manifest $10,000 by tomorrow morning, so 24 hours, I would be like, oh my God, no, I can't do that. It's impossible. Like, it can't exist within that time. But if someone said you need to have $10,000 in 2 months' time, I'd go, yep, okay, I can do that. My mind kicks in to go, yeah, I can do this, and then I can do that. Then I can put all those things out as products, and if I've got a certain number of people in, that would create the $10,000, blah, blah, blah. So the mind, is finding a way to do it. So when I looked at that, I was like, well, they're both the exact same outcomes. So the only thing that's impacting my thought processes around being able to manifest what I would want is time. And it just sort of fascinated me about that. Years, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. And I've noticed that the times when I've really got, using a lot of the word time, the times in which I'm really stressed about something actually has a time element on it. So it's because there's a deadline, or something wasn't done on time, or I've only got a short amount of time. That's one of the big ones. I've only got a short amount of time to get through this. I've got a lot of things on my to-do list, or lots of things that I perceive I have to get through, and I've only got a short amount of time. So the stress levels start to go up. So again, time shows up. It's just so interesting how many times I've observed the time aspect impacting my flow and my connection to the infinite manifestation. Well, no, my human manifestation, I should say, not even it's because I'm disconnected from my infinite, which I know can just show up in a heartbeat, in a moment, because that's how the infinite works. My human manifestation, that's when I know I'm in human manifestation, not infinite manifestation, if you like.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it ties into it actually does tie into the whole ego concept that we have been touching on, really, because it's only the ego that plays the time game, really, at the end of the day, because in the infinite world there is no time, and it's timeless, and anything can happen at the spur of a moment, drop of a hat type thing. There's nothing. It's only our belief and in our limitation that lets us think that we can't create $10,000 in an hour's time, or next minute, that type of thing. It's only that thing that holds us back. So that's where that sort of fits in. But I'm just thinking with the time, the reason this had come up, this concept, was that a friend of ours, 𝙈𝙖𝙣𝙣𝙖𝙩𝙖𝙩𝙀, who writes what she calls intuitive horoscopes. So they're not really horoscopes. They're not really based on the stars, in terms of she does not understand astrology or anything like that. It's definitely just an intuitive flow for her. This is just what comes through her, and she uses the star signs really as a system to deliver it, because people kind of understand it in that way. And there's different energies that kind of fall into those different human made zodiac signs, I guess, that we've come up with. And I'm a Capricorn, born in January, and so my audio that she'd given me for this month, I kind of listened through to see what, like, the themes for this month that were coming up, and it was all around this concept of time. And this is something I've been really butting up against in the last few days in particular. Like, something was really starting to shift in my world around this and understanding of it. And so this was sort of like a confirmation, I guess, of what's sort of been going on for me. But it was this concept of time running you. And I would say that's been a lifelong theme for me, this feeling like that I don't have enough time. I'm always running late. I can't, I've got to catch up. The feeling of something's going to take a long time, so therefore you don't start it, because it's almost like this, I'm not going to have enough time to do it, to do my best. So all these sort of stories that kind of run. And, my ego's really taken a hold of that time story when I sort of look back at it. And it's, so she was talking a lot about this release of that story. And it's probably a question I've always had for myself, is like, but how do you do that? How do you just let go of a story? Like, how do you, something that's kind of been such an integral part of my life. She had said to me before, an intuitive read, you just got to stop playing the game. And it's like, how do you just stop playing the game? Like, that's the ego asking the question, but like, how do I stop playing the game? Like, it's so that becomes almost like another ego thing that you start doing. It's like, right now I've got to stop playing the game. Work that out. Like, what does that look like? And so it's that thing that when you sort of really step back and look at it all, you kind of just like, wow, this is such a web of story that I've built for myself around this invisible concept of time that I can't even see. But this perception that I have that I have to get something done by a set time, or something's going to happen if I don't get it done by that time. And it's all like and she was using this word unnecessary pressure, which I really liked, because it was this, and that was sort of touching on, it's like, it is an unnecessary stress that we put on ourselves when we start to then create like a limitation around something, and then we try to catch up to that limitation and feel like, oh, I've got to do this, and what are the consequences of me not doing that, and the stories that kind of come out of that. So it was just sort of interesting watching this all sort of crumble in some ways for me in the last few days, and it's been really challenging in some ways, because it's just been super frustrating. I feel like I've been butting my head up against this. I allowed a lot more time yesterday. That's why we did our Facebook Live yesterday, because I thought, I'm going to get in and do a bit of work first. And then and the time just got swallowed up with everything else. And I was just sitting back kind of looking at it going, fascinating, like just sort of watching how little things just popped up to do, like, the things that I sort of felt like I did need to kind of do in the moment. And it was sort of just noticing, it's like, okay, if we sort of committed to the regular time we said we're going to do, would those things have popped up, or maybe not? So it's just interesting questioning those things sometimes about, why am I putting that time frame on myself, or why do I feel like I can't? I guess the way where it shows up for me the most, and probably a lot of people might relate to this, is the bigger visions. Like, when you've got the bigger ideas, the thing that's really calling you in your heart, and you keep putting them off. And that's what I've been doing for a very long time. So it's, this project is kind of born of that, I guess, passion of what I want to do now. And but noticing then all my limitations start to come up around that. It's like, well, I don't have, this is going to take so long to build, and we've got to do all this. And it's almost like I go into this complete procrastination mode. That's how it shows up for me, is this almost deer in the headlights, don't know what to do first, because there's so many things to do. And my brain just kind of goes, bananas, because it's using this time concept as a measure of where I've got to get to. So really seeing that coming up at the moment. So that's sort of where I'm at. And I'm still kind of working this out. Like, it's kind of just really landed in the last 24 hours. And I'm feeling like, I'm not quite sure what this looks like going forward, because this has been like my whole life. I'm like 43 years old. So it's kind of like, okay, like, let's see if I can show up differently now if I don't have that as a concept ruling me now. So.
Yeah. And it's sort of interesting that, because you had sent through her part of her reading, and it's I found the concept of unnecessary pressure really interesting as well.
Yeah.
To use that terminology, because talking about, I guess, a lot of times in spiritual teachings or consciousness work or whatever, or personal development particularly, we talk about being challenged and expanding ourselves as a result of challenges. And I really do get that concept, but it's more when the infinite gets you to do that sort of thing, like to step into a new project that you're actually a little bit terrified of doing, or you don't know how it's going to come out, sort of thing, and yet you move forward and you step into that. So then that sort of does expand awareness and consciousness itself, sort of thing. But concepts like time, putting these time pressures on yourself almost is unnecessary time pressures. That you are then, that's not there expanding you. It's, if anything, it's actually limiting you. Suddenly it's, oh my God, I can't see outside of this stress or pressure to expand. Like, I can't have expansive thoughts in this moment because I feel so pressured and so stressed. That's not cool. Like, that's not an expansive way of living or an infinite way of living. That's actually you're back in the ego and limiting yourself, sort of thing. So it's sort of, again, using time to, I don't know, see the difference between the infinite and the limited self, sort of thing.
Yes.
Using that concept.
Yes. And I think sometimes having a time, when it feels true, I think the thing, when you have a time thing that, say you want to, produce something, and you do feel like, I know for myself, like sometimes having a deadline kind of quite works for me. And maybe this is completely because of this time story I've had running, and I'm completely open to this being changed because this has just been my experience up until now. But with my industry that I was in, graphic design, there was always a deadline. There was always like everything had to be done yesterday. So it was always like an urgency constantly. And when I started working for myself about 10, 12 years ago, I would often find still that I would not jump into something until the deadline was looming. And that was like definitely a pattern that's been through my whole life. I'd study for exams at the last minute. I'd always do well. That's the thing. It was always like I had this evidence that worked for me. So, and it kind of did. That's the thing. It was like this thing that if I wait to the last minute, I actually almost have to, this is how I discovered it actually with my design work, is that if I could have a week to do a project and I would start on it, it's not like I'm sitting around doing nothing. I would actually feel like I'm actually busy all the time. There was that sense of feeling busy, which probably a lot of people can relate to, is that it doesn't mean necessarily you're doing anything productive and, towards your vision. But
you're not doing that.
but there is that concept of busyness. Like, it feels like, oh no, but I am doing stuff, and you can really talk yourself into that. It feels really legitimate, like that you are. Doing it. And but it would show up in my design work where at the last, almost at the 11th hour, when I really had to kind of just get in and buckle down and get something done, I would feel my intuitive side really kick in. So it was kind of like I had to make a choice in the direction to go with the job. So obviously with being design, it's quite conceptual, and you can go with, there's a lot of time spent in the subconscious mind, I guess, in some ways, throwing around concepts, and that's where the time kind of goes in a conceptual type of a career like design or architecture or that type of thing. And but then you really had to kind of choose a direction and go with it. And so I'd be almost forced in the moment, and I would get into such a flow, and I would just be turning stuff out left, right, center, and I'd always meet the deadline. So it's kind of like this, I'd have this evidence that works for me, this strategy, but I would fight it the whole time. There was always this sense of like, just get in and commit to something. Like, there was this sense of that. And if I look back, that is actually kind of that is a true sense, because I would say in those times that I'm supposedly doing, some work towards things, I was not connected into the infinite space. So it was definitely coming from a headspace of trying to get something done and trying to make a project work. And definitely coming from a very limited space, whereas it should be coming from that other way of the infinite flowing through me to create, an infinite outcome, rather than a limited person trying to create this infinite sort of solution for a client. It doesn't work that way. And so that's where the time thing would really show up for me. So sometimes it works, but I'm really willing to kind of challenge that concept now, because that's just how I've been all the time. But I don't know if that's true. Like, it's kind of, if time
Yeah.
doesn't exist, like, could be anything. Like, so, yeah.
Well, I can totally relate to what you're saying. And even taking, personality tests over the years, or innate talents
Yes.
questionnaires over the years and stuff. So it showed up for me that in the Colby Index, which a friend of ours does, which really is about your instincts and how you operate. If everything fell to shit and you were in an emergency situation, how would you react? So that's your innate operation. About it anymore, yeah. So for me, it showed up as quite high on what they call quick start. So it's like needing to have those set deadlines and operating within that in like really quick on-flight mode type thing. There's lots of stuff happening, and you have to make quick decisions, and you do find that flow in that short time frame and stuff. So I can totally relate to what you're saying in having those deadlines. If we have 2 weeks to pump out something, then both of us are exactly the same. It'll just take forever to get around to it, and don't find that flow in that time. But I too am actually quite open, and I think I've seen more evidence of it lately, of actually just finding my flow without needing deadlines and the stress of that. And so I can sit down and now find my flow in a piece of work, and I can sit there for hours. Time can completely pass. In fact, Jodie's always laughing at me like the place could be actually on fire, and I wouldn't even know about it. In fact, that actually did happen in Greece. But the kitchen was on fire, and I didn't realise because I was just on my computer working, sitting right there.
I get what you're saying too. I mean, I definitely get into states of flow, and I think everyone's probably experienced that at some point in time, where you just get into such. There's sort of certain conditions that create that flow state too. So it is, there is a whole kind of a science around. People have studied all that kind of thing too, about certain, you've got to have a certain amount of challenge, but you've also got to feel like you're comfortable in that space as well. And so there's all these different things that create that. So I've done that as well. But then you sort of look at the other thing of like where you've kind of sort of artificially manufacture, a time structure for yourself that probably doesn't feel true in the moment. And going back to that Colby Index that Nat's sort of talking about too, like the quick start sort of energy is definitely all about not needing to do a lot of research, just have an idea and start on it. Whereas I'm the complete opposite. I'm the I'm trying to think what the mode of operation mine is actually called.
Fact finder.
Yeah, that's one. Yeah. So I definitely and there's definitely a skill that I have too, is definitely researching and connecting the dots on a lot of things too before I jump into things. And but that can also hold me back as well, because you can constantly stay in that mode of learning as well, and not getting started on things. So it's good to know your natural instinct and how you use that to your advantage as well. So we all, as much as we all are the infinite and we're the one person, we are here in a human form. So we do come through with like personality traits and natural skills that we have. Like, why is somebody really good at music naturally, and somebody's really good at art naturally, and somebody's just really good at speaking without having to do any training? Or there is natural things that we just come through into this lifetime with, and we're here to kind of use that as an expression in the world as well. So there's definitely that to sort of look at too. It's just like we aren't all the same. We're here to have an individual experience of the infinite and express through this body too. And then we start to play with concepts like time and the limitations that we've created. Like, it's just like, okay, this it is part of the game of like a limitation that we've totally put on ourselves of time. To how do we use that to, if we do have to live in a world where there is time existing, how do we use that to our advantage, I suppose you want to say, like where we can
use it as a tool, like, and I guess that's where we're headed to the ego stuff too, is you actually use it as a tool.
Yes. Like, so it's here in the human game to play with. So it's the same with money. Money is here as part of the human game to play with, but we have so many rules and everything around it. And it's just like, okay, how do we get creative with this and actually use this to help us in our flow rather than being a limitation?
It's not being controlled by it, but taking the control back and the power back more than anything. I guess not control. Taking the power back out of those things and then using it in the game.
Yes.
How can it be useful to?
So I think in the concept of time, it's like, well, we are living in the human finite world. So, you know, things take, you know, in the storyline, things take time to get to somebody. Like, so it is just part of how we live. If everything just manifested, you know, the minute you thought about something, I mean, it wouldn't actually be that much fun. Like, you wouldn't actually work on a project and see it progress over time and get to interact with the customer or that type of thing. So, if you know, it is there to kind of be used as a tool. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had Jeannie pop in for a little bit. I think she's just but I'm so with you, Amanda. Watching my ego get engaged in the not enough time to get things done, or even the paradigm of all the time wasted. Just watching it all come up and leave and trying not to take it so seriously, but the ego sure is stubborn and it certainly wants to take control of the limits. Absolutely.
Yeah. Jeannie's definitely a very good friend of mine, and we've probably very much had the same struggles in life. We would attest to, like, both very creative, but both definitely had the time story running. So it's kind of, yeah.
So it's perfect time for her to pop in today.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
That's very cool.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, she did another one that said, "Yep, that's so me."
Yes, I'll have to talk to her offline about this.
Yes. See what she's resonating with.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right. Well, we'll go back to our scheduled programming tomorrow. But yeah, I thought that would just felt like an interesting interjection into our ego series right now that we're talking about, because I think it does hold close connection to the ego, as you're saying, man, and it's just a really interesting perspective to become aware of day to day and how it's affecting things, how it's showing up in your world, sort of thing, and whether you're feeling stressed or you're actually using it as a tool to move through your day and stay connected to more your infinite self.
Yes. Yeah, it sort of feels like, I just thinking these words were coming through, it's almost like, where do you use it as a limitation to your expression? Where do you hold yourself back from expressing this infiniteness that wants to come back through you because you have this story around time and how that shows up. So
yeah, it's amazing when you start observing how much. I think I was really stunned at how much it was affecting everything. Like, even that I've done, 15 years of this work, really felt like I was moving into an expansive state, and really getting that concept of being able to just manifest in the instant and all those sorts of things. How much time was actually still a part of that?
I would say the same too, because I definitely had expensive moments of the manifesting, but then there is still this story that's been kind of running in the background, and it's been quite, if I look at it, it's been quite, like, extremely limiting in my story that I've had this concept running in the background parallel to all this other, growth journey kind of going on. It's like, wow, like, that's how pervasive, it can get. It's just, it's sort of quite mind-blowing at times when you see the intricateness of the stories that we weave. So.
It's quite incredible, isn't it? Like, I guess that's almost an indication of how infinite we really are. We see the crazy stories that we have created for ourselves.
Yeah, and how creative we actually are to create this, and believe it's true. And
you touched on that the other day, saying, what would be the ultimate game for an infinite being? It's like to pretend that they're limited, and see how you handle that, and see what it's like to be limited. And so we've had to create and construct. It's pretty much like writing a movie script and having the set built for a movie.
Yes.
Like, there's so much detail when you look at something like Game of Thrones. Like, I'm constantly staggered by the set that they've had set up to actually shoot that one scene. And it's like, oh my God, the amount of detail that goes into that. And you're doing that every single day.
Like, look around your whole life, everything that goes in
moment.
to make that happen. It's pretty amazing.
Constructed. It's a bit like Inception. I'm looking at buildings that look exactly like Inception.
Right?
Out the window. It's exactly like Inception. It's every moment is constructed to make this seem real.
Yes.
That's amazing.
And I always like that movie, The Truman Show, which I've referenced a few times. If you haven't seen that, it's definitely worth seeing to get the Jim Carrey movie, because he's basically living on a TV set. His whole life is set up, and he has no idea that this is actually happening. So it's quite mind blowing to sort of see the interactions that get set up, and he thinks he's driving to work, and then that scene gets set up for him, and it's really cool to kind of get this concept of like, wow, like this is all happening. This is all a creation of my imagination as an infinite being. Like that's pretty amazing when you think about the power that you actually have, and then you think you're limited by this concept of time. And it's just like, okay, like it's just
it's one thing.
Humbling.
Throws you off. I think that's the funny thing, isn't it? Is like, you've got, when you really take that concept and go, oh my God, everything I have created right now in my imagination, and it's now appeared in reality in front of me.
Yes.
And yet we get so caught up in like one minute detail.
Yes.
That's like, on earth, like, let's put it in perspective.
Yes. Yes.
One thing throws you off for the day.
Yep. All right, well, maybe we'll jump back into our story around the ego things that we're going to explore, and otherwise, unless something else presents in the moment, like today. So,
I was cool. I was just really feeling like I really want to talk about this time thing for some reason. I don't know why. So,
well, it does tie into the whole ego thing too. It definitely ties into that. So I think it's still definitely on topic with where we're going anyway. So perfect. Yep.
No, that's good.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, we'll see you all tomorrow.
Bye. See ya.
After some more time.